clash of titans. Bolo Yeung versus Steven Seagal. On the filming set of the movie Bloodsport 2 Music at the Golden Harvest Studio in Hong Kong, there was the suffocating heat of August 1995, turning every movement into an ordeal. Bolo, who at that moment was 59 years old, but whose physique still defied the logic of aging, was rehearsing a fight scene with the choreographer when a familiar voice sounded from the studio entrance. "Be on the lookout, old friend." In that voice were those very condescending notes, music, that Bolo had learned to recognize instantly. Steven Seagal entered the set, invited by one of the producers, who believed that the presence of a star would create publicity for the film. With his characteristic long hair to his shoulders, dressed music, as usual, all in black, Seagal walked to the center of the studio with confidence bordering on arrogance. "I heard music, you're starring in another action movie." Seagal continued as he approached music, and his words were soaked with poorly concealed superiority. "You know, if you need help with fight choreography music, I could show you a few real Aikido techniques. That would make the scenes much more authentic." Bolo slowly turned around. Those who knew him well music noticed a spark of irritation in his eyes. Before he could answer, Seagal uttered words that changed everything. "Actually, between us, I think that in a real fight I'm better. Aikido surpasses any kung fu when it comes to true effectiveness." The film set froze, technicians stopped moving, the cameras fell silent, and a thick stillness hung over the studio. What happened in the next 8 seconds not only etched itself into the memory of everyone present, but also became one of the harshest lessons about the difference between words and actions. Roots of the conflict. The tension between Bolo Yeung and Steven Seagal did not originate that day. Its roots went back to the mid-80s, when Seagal began making waves in Hollywood after his debut in Above the Law in 1988. At that time, Seagal made bold statements in interviews, music, claiming that his Aikido training placed him above other martial arts actors. He directly mentioned that actors' music, such as Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, and Bolo, were merely athletes with music muscles, lacking the technical sophistication that he possessed. These statements deeply offended Bolo, who had devoted more than 50 years of his life to the serious study of traditional Chinese music martial arts. For him, Seagal's words were not just arrogant. They were ignorant and demonstrated fundamental disrespect for traditions with centuries-old history. Bolo maintained public silence, following the music kung fu principle that an empty bamboo rattles the loudest. He nevertheless expressed contempt in private conversations for Seagal's self-absorbed style. The challenge. When Seagal declared his superiority, about 30 people witnessed it. Directors, camera operators, sound engineers, and actors. All music of them looked from Bolo to Seagal, waiting for the reaction of the legendary master. Bolo closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, a control technique he had learned decades earlier in the Shaolin Temple. When he opened them, the decision was made. He could not leave this arrogance unanswered on his own territory. "Steven," Bolo said in a calm but steel-hard voice, "if you think you are better, prove it here and now. Not with words, but with action." Seagal smiled his trademark confident smile. "Music. Are you sure, Bolo? I don't want to injure someone your age. You're almost 60. This condescension was like gasoline poured on a fire. Bolo took 2 steps forward, closing the distance to 2 meters. "Worry about yourself." "Music," Bolo replied. "I'm giving you a free opportunity. Try to apply any technique of your superior Aikido. If you can even touch me with a valid move within the next 30 seconds, I will publicly admit that your art is superior." 8 seconds of reality. Music, the film's choreographer, a UNBA veteran who had worked with Jackie Chan, quickly cleared space. Music, there were no mats and no complicated rules. Steven Seagal took his characteristic Aikido stance. A triangular position, weight on the back leg, hands ready to intercept. Bolo, simply music, stood in a neutral stance, feet shoulder-width apart, arms relaxed at his sides. "Begin," commanded Naiba. Seagal moved first, trying to close the distance to apply his favorite technique, Nikio, a painful wrist lock. But when Seagal's hands were just centimeters from Bolo's wrist, The Kung Fu master simply shifted his arm. It was not an exaggerated movement. It was a precise retreat of only 20 centimeters. But that was enough for Seagal's hands to grasp empty space. At the same moment, taking advantage of the fact that Seagal had shifted his weight forward, Bolo stepped to the side and applied a Kung Fu technique called Lao Sa, the pulling music hand. His left hand touched Seagal's extended elbow, and with an almost casual motion, he jerked it downward while simultaneously pushing Seagal's right shoulder in the opposite direction. The effect was devastating. Seagal's body lost balance. Physics was against him. Music Bolo perfectly used the moment of his opponent's maximum vulnerability. To the spectators, it looked like slow motion, but in reality, less than 2 seconds passed. Steven Seagal crashed to the floor. It was not an elegant cinematic roll. It was a clumsy and humiliating fall. Music, the dull sound of his back hitting the hard floor, echoed through the studio. But Bolo was not finished. Before Seagal could comprehend what had happened, Bolo was already over him. His right hand froze 2 centimeters from Seagal's throat. Music, his fingers were folded into a spear shape, a position that in a real fight would mean a lethal music strike to the trachea. Aftermath. Absolute silence reigned on the set. Steven Seagal, who 2 minutes earlier had asserted his superiority, lay on the floor, completely defeated by a man almost 30 years older than him. Bolo held the position for 3 seconds so the meaning of what had happened would reach everyone, then stepped back and extended a hand to help Seagal up. It was a gesture of respect, but Seagal ignored it. He stood up, music on his own. His face turned crimson with shame and anger. It was an accident. Music, Seagal muttered, but his voice sounded hollow. Bolo slowly shook his head. That was not an accident, Steven. That was reality. Reality is that talking is not the same as doing. Techniques that work in demonstrations with compliant students do not always work against opponents who know what they are doing. He added, music. Your Aikido has value. I do not deny that. But it is not invincible. Music. When you come to Hong Kong and claim superiority without foundation, you show disrespect not only to me, but to traditions with a 1,000-year history. Seagal met Bolo's gaze, music, and for a moment something changed in his eyes. Perhaps he realized that Hollywood fame does not grant automatic authority in the world of true masters. He had come to impress, but his illusion was shattered in less than 10 seconds. Real interaction. Music director Robert Klaus, seeing an opportunity to defuse the situation, approached them. Well, that was instructive, Steven. Perhaps, music, it's better we continue this conversation in private. We have a shooting schedule, music, to keep. It was a diplomatic exit, giving Seagal a chance to leave the set without further public humiliation. Seagal immediately took it, nodded stiffly, and headed for the exit, music, saying nothing more to Bolo or anyone else. His body language had completely changed compared to music, what it was 30 minutes earlier. Arrogant confidence gave way to a closed posture, slumped shoulders, and hurried steps of a man, music, who simply wanted to be anywhere but there. After Seagal's departure, silence lingered on the set for a few seconds before music, normal work, gradually resumed. But all the whispered conversations were about the same thing. Did they really witness a Hollywood star, Steven Seagal, being so quickly and completely subdued? The answer was undeniable. Yes, and everyone understood, music, that this story would spread instantly. Yinya approached Bolo with a smile. Music, that was perfect mastery. Big brother not only in technique, but in timing, in the ability to read the opponent and not use more force than necessary. Bolo shrugged, returning to his characteristic modesty. Nothing special. Music, he telegraphed his intentions from the moment he decided to move. Music, his weight was distributed incorrectly. His shoulders tensed before his hands moved, and his eyes looked exactly where he intended to grab. For someone with experience, it was like reading an open book. That was the fundamental difference the encounter revealed. Bolo spent decades learning not just techniques, but how to read opponents, recognize subtle signs of intent, and use windows of opportunity, music, that open and close in fractions of a second. In the following days, the story of this encounter spread through Hong Kong like wildfire. Everyone Music, who was on the set that day, told friends and colleagues. Music, the Hong Kong martial arts community, always close-knit and united. Music heatedly discussed the incident. Some expressed satisfaction that Seagal's arrogance was finally challenged. Others, Music more philosophically inclined, saw it as a necessary lesson in humility and respect. Interestingly, at the time the story never reached major Western media. It was before the era of social networks, when every moment is recorded and spread instantly. The only evidence remained the memories of eyewitnesses. And although everyone told it with slight variations, the essence remained unchanged. Bolo dominated Seagal in less than 10 seconds, using basic kung fu techniques against supposedly superior Aikido. For Bolo, the incident was just another day on the film Music set. He did not view it as a defining moment or a reason for boasting. It was simply what happens when reality collides with illusion, and genuine experience with inflated claims. Steven Seagal never publicly spoke about the incident. He finished his promotional tour in Asia and returned to Hollywood, where he continued his film career. However, people close to him noticed subtle changes. His public statements about being the best fighter or possessing invincible technique became less frequent. In interviews, he began to talk more about the philosophy of Aikido and less about its effectiveness in combat. Some interpreted this as maturity, others as a lesson finally learned. The broader resonance of this encounter went far beyond two individuals. It became a kind of case study on several important themes: the difference between mastery in a controlled environment and effectiveness against real resistance, how blind arrogance can lead to a situation Music where your limitations are brutally exposed, and that true mastery does not need constant proclamation. It reveals itself when necessary Music, and then returns to modesty. Years later, in 2003, Bolo gave an extensive interview for a documentary about the golden age of Hong Kong martial arts cinema. The interviewer, having heard rumors about the Seagal incident, asked him about it directly. Bolo smiled with the wisdom of a man who had lived long enough Music to view such moments from a distance. Steven is a talented actor, Bolo diplomatically said. He makes entertaining films. His acting ability was never the problem. The problem was that he confused skill in one area with superiority in everything. He confused knowledge of an art with mastery of real combat. It's a common mistake, especially when success in a field like Hollywood makes you think you're an expert in all areas. The interviewer pressed on. But did you really defeat him in 8 seconds, as the legend says? Bolo laughed quietly. Music. I don't know exactly how many seconds it took, but it was fast. Not because I'm incredible, but because when someone is not prepared for real combat, when his techniques depend on the cooperation of a partner who isn't cooperating, the result is predictable. If this story made you reflect on the importance of backing words with actions and maintaining humility despite success, like this video and share it. Write in the comments, Music, what lesson you took from this legendary encounter. The legacy of this meeting goes beyond a single moment. It became part of martial arts folklore, stories told in dojos and gyms around the world as a warning against pride. Music for young students. It is a perfect lesson. No matter how good you think you are, there will always be someone better, more experienced, someone who can expose you if you come with arrogance instead of respect. Bolo continued working in cinema until the early 2000s, always maintaining the level of professionalism and modesty that characterized him throughout his career. He never used the Seagal incident for promotional purposes. That was the behavior of a true master, one who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. This story reminds us that in martial arts, as in life, there is a fundamental difference between what we claim and what we can demonstrate. Steven Seagal built an image of invincibility, reinforced by staged films. But when he was tested in conditions close to reality, that image collapsed in 8 seconds. It's not that Seagal had no skills at all Music. He simply allowed his ego to write checks his abilities could not cash. Until we meet again in the next video with new exciting stories about martial arts legends and timeless lessons that are still relevant today.